Craig, then Kevin.
Ilham. I mean, leadership starts at the top. It's got to start with the government. The government has to provide the framework, the vision. Of course, the developers are critical. But you know, if developers are completely left to their own devices, they'll develop what's going to be most financially beneficial to them. It may not necessarily be, you know, creating good social outcomes for the greater population. So it really does have to start with the government. And you know, a lot of the subjects we've talked about today,
for
connectivity,
affordable
linking
housing.
these
That's the key
superblocks
too,
with each other. One of the panelists made the comment about, you know, the distance from Jakarta. I mean, if you live, it doesn't matter how many kilometers you are away from your place of work. The question is how quickly you can get from your place of residence to your place of work. So, you know, all of these satellite cities that are surrounding Jakarta to the west, to the east, and now to the south, you know, if the connectivity was better and it's more affordable, then we're going to see a lot more integration, and that's going to be a lot more productive for the workforce. So starts with the government, but you know, there's many different ways to do that. And I think, as I've mentioned before, we can learn a lot from what we've seen happen overseas, you know, but it takes political will. It takes somebody in government at the very high level to say this is how we're going to do it. Perhaps, and I'm not suggesting we should create more bureaucracy, but I think if it's an important enough issue for the future development of our cities in Indonesia, it's an important enough issue, it will be, you know, somebody, a Mandarin or a ministerial level, you know, cabinet position for planning for these sorts of things. I think that's where it's got to start.
Thank you, Craig. Kevin?
I think it comes down also to, sorry, I'm sat behind, is a vision for where you see Jakarta. I'll talk about Jakarta primarily, where the city's going to be in 10, 15, 20 years' time. In Singapore and Hong Kong, it's primarily government-driven. Major infrastructure is government-driven. In working here in Indonesia, in the last probably 6 months to a year, we've been contacted by private developers talking about how do they learn about building transit systems.
Yeah, he's still got a question. Yeah.
So they're coming at it from completely opposite end of the spectrum, because they realise that some of these mega developments, 600-700 hectare developments, cannot exist without mass transit systems. So somehow you've got the private sector realising it has to be done. The danger is you're going to end up with several different systems not joined up. So it's got to be a balance, but there's got to be somebody in central government leading that vision of where they see Jakarta being in the next 10, 15 years.
Thank you. Thank you. We had a question here, right in front. Oh, okay, right there, gentleman with the microphone. We've been given another 10 minutes, I can see by the clock here, so please, go ahead.
Okay, my name is Ronald Lim. I just want to address questions to developer and financial. First, when a typical developer launch the property, what kind of statistic when those buyers who buy the property, statistically, are they investor mostly or user? That's the first question. However, if it's an investor, then after that, they buy it directly from the developer, they may wish to sell to someone else in a secondary market. And if the developer is not able to get their RJB, so this typical investor will have difficulty to sell to buyers who are, really want to buy and stay, because this middle income group will probably need bank financing. So the bank will say that where is the document, where is the RJB? If there's no RJB, most likely the bank will not make a loan to the borrower to buy the property. Correct me if I'm wrong. Thank you.
Who wants to take that on? Joshua? No.
Yeah, maybe I can answer, but because during my career in the bank, I was in a lending officer, so I think the issue arises when the developer, they still owe money to the bank to develop the property, and the master HGB, master HGB, is still being held as collateral. The complication arises when the buyer want to borrow money from another bank. No. That's when things start to get stuck. So probably one solution is for the buyer to go to the to the bank that lend money to the developer, because that way is more easier. Thank you.
Joshua, anything to add? Okay.
I think if we look at the data, Pak, I think most of property buyer are speculators, yeah, around 30 to 40%, and then 40% is investor, and the rest is end buyer. So I think I agree with Pak Eko that again, I think whenever there is as long as the borrower comply with the requirement and so on, I think there is no restrictions for bank to lend their money to the borrower against. Again, the mortgages is very huge potential to be penetrated going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll get back to the front here. Here in the front. Raise your hand so they can see where to bring the microphone. Okay, 2 people at that table. Those might be our last 2, so.
Okay. Hi, hello, I'm Philando. Good afternoon. My questions are, what are the things that haven't owned by Superblocks in Indonesia when we compare to other countries besides the connectivity? And the second is, what the developer should do to give a value added for each Superblock project? Thank you.
Very clear, very short. Thank you. Who wants to take those on?
This question is for, wait a minute, for Mr. Kevin and Mr. Craig.
Okay, repeat the first question again, please.
Yeah. The first question is, what are the things that haven't owned by Superblocks in Indonesia when we compare to other countries besides the connectivity?
So if I'm right in understanding, what's special about Superblocks here as opposed to other countries? What is particular to Indonesia?
No, I mean, because we are talking about the Superblocks, so I mean, when we compare from Indonesia to other countries, where is, which part that Indonesia doesn't have it right now? So which one area that we need to improve it besides the connectivity? Thank you.
That's a good question. We're doing a lot of Superblocks, I suppose, in China. It's probably where most of the Superblock developments are happening. And I guess what we've seen over the last couple of years is a big change in terms of the previous, more traditional Superblock was very enclosed, very kind of a podium with blocks on top and another podium over the road with blocks on top. Very little connectivity within the Superblock and within the Superblock and the surrounding. Now we're finding them becoming much more open, much more connected, much more civic space, much more public space, not purely air-conditioned malls, not purely air-conditioned spaces. So I think in Indonesia, yeah, it's hot, yeah, there's a climate that we've got to deal with, but I think Superblocks here are going to become much more layered, much more fragmented, much more open, much more civic, and not purely dedicated to investors, end users and shoppers.
Thank you. Question here, very brief, please.
My question is directed to Pak Ilham. Do you think that Superblocks is the future for urban Indonesia, given that the connectivity between Superblocks is established?
Repeat again, hold the microphone a little closer.
Do you think that Superblocks is the future for urban Indonesia, given that the connectivity between these Superblocks are established well?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, first of all, the general trend in Indonesia is definitely going more and more urban, right? I think last year or the 2 years before, for the first time Indonesia had more people living in urbanities than in the rural area. So it is predicted that in around 2030 or so, 70% of Indonesians will live in urbanities. So the trend is definitely going more and more into the city. Connectivity is a major issue, of course. And I mean, if you look around Indonesia, you have a lot of cities that are, I mean, I have to say that we have a lot of more and more good mayors in Indonesia. I mean, not only in this city, but also in others, like in Surabaya or in Solo, and there's many. And if you ask the population about what is the major problem that you have in your day-to-day life, I mean, connectivity is top 3. I mean, everybody complains in every city about the traffic. So I believe because of that, the connectivity issue will be taken up, and people will just demand better solutions for that. And I think that would be a good if the mayors and the municipalities, the leaders of those will suggest and implement a solution for the connectivity. Then I mean, just imagine the stations of those connectivity, like MRT or LRT. I could see development around those stations. Right? I mean, I think the price of land will probably go enormously up. I can imagine that some of these stations will be a superblock themselves. Yeah. So just not really near the station, but above the station. So that, yes, I could see that will be, that to your question, yes, I think a superblock will be more and more interesting for Indonesians to consider either as a living space or as an investment. Yeah.
And very last question, gentleman in the back here, hold your hand up so we can get a microphone to you.
20 seconds.
Hi, my name is David. I'm from LG Hooker. I would like to address the issue of information technology effects to real estate development. In terms of online stores, so is it wise for us to build another commercial spaces? In terms of co-working spaces, is it wise for us to build another high-rise building offices? So, anybody who would like to take the questions? Thank you.
Okay, yes. Craig?
I think that's a cracking question as well, in terms of how the way that we live is changing very, very quickly. And we talk about, you know, urbanisation, and that's definitely been the trend.
I think we'll wrap it up.
More and more people are living in urban centres. So yes, we're building more and more high-rise, more dense superblock developments. But how's that going to change in the medium term with new information, new ways of shopping, new ways of retail, new ways of working, new ways of designing office buildings? I think that over the next 2, 3, 4 years, there's going to be some really fundamental changes in the way that we as designers, as real estate experts, start looking at our cities, because I think we haven't actually caught up with the way that people are beginning to live their lives.
Okay, Ilham, please.
I think what we can expect of a superblock in the future might look very different from what we know today. I believe that at some point in time, superblocks could be seen as a point where you can see some farming, some urban farming, maybe going up the wall, or somehow integrated into the superblock so you can get things that you need for your daily household, even fresh from the superblock. Talk about energy. Energy, I think I could think about special mechanisms that would, because you have high-rise buildings that might be good for wind energy, or solar, of course, you can also integrate into that. So I think the question of energy and sustainability, also in terms of urban life, there's another aspect that has not been really answered and addressed by many. I mean, there are some concepts that I've seen so far in the world, but I think we have to imagine a superblock in the future maybe a little bit different than we know it today. So yes, the higher is maybe not only something interesting in terms of urban development, but sometimes in terms of energy creation, sometimes in terms of creating spaces for things you would usually do horizontally, you maybe want to do it vertically in the future, right? We have to be a little bit more innovative about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid we're out of time. I'd like to make a final observation. I've been to many seminars over the years, and usually in the Q&A period, the room empties out, and by the time it's over, the room is empty. But I can see right now the room is just as full as when we started, and I think that's a tribute to the quality and the wisdom of our speakers. So please join me in giving them a very big hand. Thank you very much, Trevor. Thank you.